All right, welcome back to part two of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. X and KB coming at you as we always do. Thank you to all of our viewers, all of our listeners, however you watch us, however you listen to us. We appreciate it. Happy New Year once again to everybody. If you're just now joining us and you missed out on part one, you'll be able to catch that here shortly. But hope everybody's having a prosperous start to 2026. And hopefully my Los Angeles Lakers can get it going for 2026 because 2025 closed out on a very sour note, KB. Losing big to the Pistons on December 30th, which also happened to be LeBron James's 41st birthday. Happy birthday to LeBron, his 23rd season, and all the greatness he's ever given us to the league. We got problems right now in Tinseltown in LA. They are 19-11 on the season. They're now sixth in the West, but it's very clear that when they play teams that are contenders, they're nowhere near the stratosphere of them. I cannot describe to you the disgust that I had watching that fourth quarter against the Detroit Pistons, mainly because of the lack of effort on defense and just the lack of effort overall that I saw. And to all the folks out there who had something to say about JJ Redick, oh, well, why isn't he putting the blame on himself? I agree. He should have put some of the blame on himself and said, I have to be better too. How can you watch that product that I watched on Tuesday night and not say that the message of what he's saying is correct? CKB, here's what I figured out when it comes to JJ Redick. There are a lot of folks out there who are Doc Rivers fans or people who just don't like what JJ Redick has to say because it's smug and it comes across as arrogant. And I agree it is kind of smug. But the truth doesn't care who tell it. And don't shoot the messenger. Listen to the message. He is 100% right when he says things like effort is a choice. Defense is a choice. And although he's not putting names to this stuff, I'm going to put a name to it right now. LeBron James is not what he used to be anymore. Yes, he stopped playing defense effectively years ago, probably to preserve himself for what he needed to do on offense. I'm looking at number 77 wearing purple and gold, Luka Doncic, and I am asking, why are you not giving any effort on the defensive end on most of these games? Now, yes, in Christmas Day against Houston, I saw the chase down block he had in the first quarter. That was great. That's not all defense is about, though. You at least got to get out there and shuffle your feet. You know, as Kendrick Perkins would say, slide those puppies out there. You can do something out there, Luka. There were too many times, KB, in that game against Detroit in particular, where I saw Luka just standing around. Or I saw him looking like he was going to start to try to play defense, and then he stops, doesn't even play. There was a play in particular in the fourth quarter where somebody had poked the ball loose, and Luka's running back with the Detroit player, then stops running after the ball. That ball is recovered by the Detroit player before it goes out of bounds, and it's pushed down low to Isaiah Stewart, who puts in a two-handed jam. And I saw the look on JJ Redick's face, and it was the same look on my face. Absolutely disgusting. This is not what Los Angeles Lakers basketball is about. And I know we all have been excited because of what Luka can do offensively. And we've said, oh man, this is probably the best Lakers player that we've had out here doing offensive production since Kobe. Kobe was a two-way basketball player, 9 times first team all defense. And let's take it all the way. And this is not just Luka on the Lakers problem. This goes all the way back to Dallas. And this makes me raise the question, are y'all folks in Dallas sure that Nico Harrison did a terrible thing when he traded Luka the way that he did? Because Cooper Flagg, since we last had this conversation, KB, he's coming into his own now. And he's looking really good out there. It wouldn't surprise me if Cooper Flagg is voted in as a rookie for the All-Star game, even though the Dallas Mavericks don't have the record that they would like to have right now. They have some injuries that you have to take into account for that. But I'm just looking at the individual growth of Cooper Flagg. That is your franchise star going forward. And by the way, he plays both sides of the basketball too. He plays on defense. That's something we've always had to question about Luka. You remember after game 3 of the 2024 NBA Finals, Brian Windhorst being on SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt and him going on an absolute tangent about Luka Doncic, saying that until he takes it amongst himself to get better, he will not be coming out of that winner's tunnel over there. And obviously the Celtics went on to win that NBA Finals in a 4-1 gentleman's sweep. The same things have followed over to LA. He doesn't play defense. And if you're looking very closely, folks, skinny Luka is not looking like skinny Luka exactly right now anymore either. Something has also gone wrong with the nutrition as of lately too. Something has to be cleaned up there. And I'm trying not to make it sound like we are pushing code red right now because, yes, they are still 8 games over 500. They are 6 in the West. I'm not saying they should punt on the season, but we need to be realistic about what we are at this point. This is not a championship team. There are moves that are going to have to be made. Those moves probably will not come until the offseason when we probably say goodbye to LeBron James, whether it's goodbye as a Laker or goodbye as an NBA player all the way around. That Austin Reeves trade potentially happening, I think it has to happen now because you got to get more than what you have in there, especially from an athletic standpoint, a 3-and-D standpoint. I like guys like Nick Smith Jr. I want to see him get more playing time, but he wasn't consistent against Detroit on Wednesday. And those are going to be growing pains for a young player in the league. I get it. But all of this starts with number 77 wearing purple and gold. Luka, this ain't Dallas, bro. This is LA. We have championship expectations here. We are looking at you. It all starts with you. If you're not going to be out there playing defense, the rest of those guys aren't going to play it either. You have to put in some type of effort. I am not saying that you need to be Tony Allen in his prime out there, first team all defense, but you have to shuffle your feet. You have to slide those puppies. You have to put in some form of effort. Basketball is not a one-way sport.
Yeah, I'm gonna be this like quite blunt about it. As great as he is as an offensive talent, I have to look at you as like you're an incomplete basketball player because defense is about effort. It doesn't take much to do effort. And I ain't saying you got to lock somebody down for 48 minutes a game. I'm not saying that. But you can't be a cone. You cannot be a cone on defense because as soon as your man gets past you, now others have to jump from their rotate. They have to rotate to your guy because you have completely given up on defense. I've seen Luka have some of the worst defensive stances. He looks like his feet are stuck in mud. He looks like he is just completely uninterested in playing defense completely. And this is a problem that LA is now seeing that I believe that Dallas saw. Nico Harrison saw this. So a lot of people didn't understand the Luka Doncic trade, but also look at it like this from Nico Harrison's standpoint. You have Cooper Flag now. If you had a healthy AD, healthy Kyrie, I do think that Dallas would be more competitive. Had that happened, we look at Nico Harrison as, possibly being a genius, removing himself from Luka Doncic and getting him out of Dallas because we're looking at him as he is the exact same player that he was in Dallas. A great offensive engine, puts up great numbers, plays not a lick of defense. And while a lot of people are quick to say, yeah, he's one of the top 5 best players in the world, you can be all that. And you still don't play defense. You're still a cone on defense. We're still going to have people take advantage of you. He's actively hunted in switches. That's not a good thing. Because when he's hunting in switches, when LeBron's not playing the same defense that he once was, when you have guys like Marcus Smart, who's, a great defender in his own right, but you don't have the 3-and-D guys that you necessarily need to be competitive in the Western Conference. They're not better than OKC. They're not better than Houston. They're not better than Denver. They're not better than a couple of the teams that they're going to have to go through if they're talking about being in the Western Conference Final. I'm not even talking about the NBA Finals at this point. If you should be shooting to just at least get in and hope that you don't fall into that 7 through 9 range. That's where you're hoping to stay out of because you're going to have to win games ugly sometimes. How do you win games ugly? You have to grind. You have to play defense. You have to do the little things, go for loose balls, do things that other teams would not be willing to do. Luka Doncic, regardless if he wants to say it's fair or not, you spearheading this whole thing. Go ahead.
One point I want to make before you continue on this. There was a point last season where we were looking at the Lakers as one of the top defensive teams in the league. And that's when Anthony Davis was still there. Now, I know that he is a walking injury basically waiting to happen. But when Anthony Davis was still there, they were actively playing defense every single night. They have fallen off the defensive rail since Luka Doncic got there.
And I'm gonna tell you another player that I'm kind of disappointed in, but honestly, not necessarily because he has talent. But I warned a lot of Laker fans about that you're going to see the real him. That's DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton, I remember when he first got to the Lakers and he was playing well and everybody was on. They would call him dominating. Everybody was in love with him. But you see how he kind of falls back into those little tendencies that he had in Phoenix, those little tendencies that he had in Portland. He's showing you who he really is. Regardless of the team, DeAndre Ayton is not the force that he should be in that middle. He's not. The Lakers have the lack of rim protection shows is glaring. We see teams that have rim protection, and you see what goes into, like, if you're gonna have somebody like Luka who doesn't play a lick of defense, you have to have someone who's a dominating force in that back end to protect the rim. They don't have that. I don't care if you want to say they got Jackson Hayes and they have DeAndre Ayton. They have no rim protection. Point blank, period. And the Lakers are going to continue to struggle. And X, I know that you said that they have championship pedigree and that this ain't Dallas. I get that. Until Luka changes the way that he plays basketball, Lakers aren't going to win. Because it's going to be teams that are going to take advantage of him every single time. You look at the OKCs, they'll never beat the OKC in a 7-game series. They'll never beat a team like Houston in a 7-game series because they will wear them down. Yeah, Luka can go out and score 30, but he's going to give up 40. So it doesn't matter. I don't care how great you are of an offensive talent. That does not give you an excuse to just be terrible on defense because, he's giving up all this, he's putting in all this effort on the offense end. Bruh, we came up when you were in high school and college or overseas. You've been a pro since you were a teenager. You had to play defense. This is not a choice. This is something that you have to either you're going to do or you're not going to do. But if you're not going to do it, I don't want to hear about all the accolades that he has. He sucks on defense. And the biggest thing that I've looked at, someone said he's a 6'7", 6'8" Trae Young. The biggest thing that I've seen is you have the frame to actually play defense. You just choose not to. That to me don't fly with me. Like, and if I was JJ Redick, part of the thing is I don't need to talk all the time in the media and chew out my team through the media. I'm chewing you out to your face because sometimes some players just honestly need to be chewed out, no matter who it is, whether that's LeBron, whether that's Luka. Your greatness doesn't excuse you from criticism. It just doesn't. And your criticism, Brian Windhorst's criticism, and others that have had criticism of Luka has all been the exact same thing. If you are not going to give effort, you are not going to win. Period. We don't care about the numbers. You can put up all the triple doubles that you want. You can score all the points. You could be a great playmaker. But if you are not going to give the effort on the defensive end, and I don't care who it is, you will not win. Period.
And to that point of everything that you just said, I still have hope for the long-term future, KB. And the reason I have hope is because Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka don't run this show anymore. Moneybags Mark is here now. Mark Walter. He's now the primary owner of the Lakers, primary owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And one thing that I've learned about Mark Walter in his time as the owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers, he will move off of people in order to get something better or what he thinks will be better. In his time with the Dodgers, we saw him move off Corey Seager, Trey Turner, Manny Machado, Zach Greinke. These are guys who were really great players at the time, too, when he moved off them. To go get the Freddie Freemans, the Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtanis. We saw him move off Cody Bellinger, who won a National League MVP with this team. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away. But if Luka Doncic does not improve and he continues to be the reason, especially defensively, that this team is not reaching the potential that they should be reaching, I have no doubt that Mark Walters would package him and his contract up and start over again if he had to get what this team ultimately needs. Because it's not about winning one championship. It's about winning multiple championships. It's about building the dynasty and bringing the dynasty back. So realistically, I don't think there's anything too much that they're going to be able to do this year. I think it all starts within the next off season. But I'm gonna throw two other teams at you because you mentioned Houston and you mentioned OKC. We got to throw Denver out of the mix right now. Unfortunately, Jokic and the other injuries that they have. Thankfully, Jokic's injury is not as serious as it looked like it was going to be, having that hyperextended knee against Miami. I don't think the Lakers want to see Minnesota or San Antonio either. I don't think they could beat either of them in a 7-game series, to be quite honest with you. Because could you imagine the way that the Lakers play and the way that Wemby controls the paint? What would happen there? That's going to be an ugly sight to see. So realistically, I don't think it's anything that they can do for this season. You know, get into the playoffs, and hopefully you can go as far as you can go. But at this point, I have no expectations for this team anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought in San Antonio. Like, I don't think they will want to see them in a 7-game series because of threat of Wemby and also guys like, I'm not gonna lie, the more and more I've looked at him, the more I see why they were so enamored with him and Dylan Harper. He got a calmness and a smoothness to his game that I think that you need from a lead guard. And, also with De'Aaron Fox, we're still, waiting to see if he'll be moved. So there's no telling what that team will look like post-trade deadline. As far as Denver goes, though, yes, with Jokic being out with that hyperextension, I think that it does hurt them right now. But I will say this. Signing Jonas Valanciunas in the offseason did help have at least a serviceable big man until Jokic gets back. So while it's, we're wishing him a speedy recovery, it's not the worst thing in the world if you're Denver, if you can at least hold down the fort until he gets back. But having Jonas Valanciunas, who's been a starting center in this league for years and years, it helps the fact that you got somebody that you can put in there at least until your, MVP gets back. I think that the Lakers, they, you spoke about the new ownership, not being, afraid to move off of great players. And I think that that's something that you also got to, you cannot allow one player to handicap your franchise. You should never do that, no matter what team it is. But especially when you have a history of winning, you definitely should not allow one player to dictate how your franchise, as far as winning goes. You should never do that. So I do think that, baseball is one of those things, like, if you're going to win, you're going to have to be able to make some tough decisions. And you could be a hometown favorite. You could be all of that. You could be a fan favorite. Does not mean we won't move off of you if need be. Like I said, the Dodgers have been building a dynasty for the last couple of years. And so, for a team that's won repeatedly, they're not afraid to get rid of guys and they're not afraid to bring guys in. So if he has to bring that philosophy to the Lakers, who, have been a prestigious franchise, one of the most recognizable franchises in the world, I'm all for it.
Well, are you all for your Atlanta Hawks moving off Trae Young too? Because that's where we got to go next. Because the rumors are now flying rampant that Trae Young will be moved before the trade deadline. The Hawks have only won 1 game since he returned in the past 7 games. I don't know, man. Sometimes it looks like those guys don't really enjoy playing out there with him. We know that he's a liability on defense himself too. But it just appears that we are now going to go all in on the Jalen Johnson era. Hey, and that's probably the best thing to do at this point because he has been a great player out there all season. That's somebody else who should be an all-star this year.
So I do want to speak on this because I've been going back and forth on a lot of this, since these reports have been coming out. While I think Trae Young, his play style does, leave a lot to be desired, he's not the major problem on the Hawks right now. I think their roster, we look at a guy like Kristaps Porzingis. Him being available changes the landscape of how this team looks. Their roster makes so much sense when you add him back into the lineup. And we saw that against Minnesota the other day, how much having him out there matters. So, and we talked about with Luka, when you have a guy who struggles defensively, having a rim protector does matter. It makes sense. Another thing that Hawks have struggled with, like we talk about Trae Young a lot. Now I know a lot of casual people who don't watch the games actually don't get the Hawks have gotten out rebounded in pretty much the majority of their games this season. Why is that? You have a starting center in Yeka Okongwu who is 6'9". You're going to get out rebounded a lot. Second chance points have killed the Hawks this year. How do I know this? I've actually sat and watched the games. They have lost to Detroit every single matchup this year from being out rebounded, out physical. These are things that Trae Young is a problem in the sense of the ball is stagnant and doesn't move as much. The offense is not as free flowing when he is out there. Also, when he is out there, he has an unwillingness so far that he's shown in his career to work off ball. These are things that Trae Young's play style have made it an issue. Jalen Johnson should be the lead dog no matter what. Because of his size, he allows them to do a lot of more things. And he is a playmaker in his own right. So that point forward role is suited for him. I think that when you look at what the Hawks have constructed, he is a problem, but he is a small problem to an even larger problem. Because we've talked for years that Trae Young has been handicapped by the Hawks for previous years in the past, not including the year that they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. I even look back at that under a microscope because if we're going to be completely honest, they shouldn't have went to the Eastern Conference Finals that year. Philly, Ben Simmons, Doc Rivers, they caused that. That run was a great run, but let's not get it confused. It should have ended in round 2. It should have ended in round 2. If we're going to be objectively clear, he has not had a comparable team. He has not had comparable talent to play with for pretty much all of his tenure in Atlanta. And now the moment that they get, talented roster around him, he still has certain things that have not factored in. Like, yes, they were not winning at the beginning of the season. I had looked at that as chemistry issues. When they went on the run that they went on outside of him when he was hurt, if you look at the teams that they played, especially on that West Coast trip, majority of those teams weren't good teams. They were beating teams, but they weren't beating the cream of the crop when it comes to the NBA. The best team that they beat in that run that they had was the Lakers, and they still didn't have LeBron. We got to stop looking at these things and look at it from a whole because, like I said, a casual fan will look at it and say, yeah, they play better without Trae. I look at it as they play more free without Trae. They have their offense, everyone is involved. You look at guys like Vit Krejci. You look at guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's having a career year. Those guys benefit from Trae not being there because of the fact that they're getting a lot more touches. They're allowing themselves to go get their shot and make for others that they may not get while Trae is out there. Because Trae does slow down the ball. If you look at the games, Trae rebound when there's a rebound and they're pushing the ball in transition, Trae Young is off most of the time calling for the ball to bring the ball up. In the non-Trae Young minutes, that would be Jalen Johnson. And Jalen Johnson needs to be the de facto number 1 player on this team. This is his team now. Not meaning that Trae Young is a bad player, but he may not fit the formula for what this team is trying to build. But the only way I see you moving off of a player like Trae is if you get something comparable in return. If you're not going to get comparable return, then if you're not going to get something that's going to help you win now, I don't see what doing the trade would do other than moving just off of the contract. But then you have to have teams out there willing to take on his contract as well. So it's not just a simple, they need to trade him. There has to be a market out there for him. And right now, I don't know what the market would be for him because the trade packages that I've seen, it would be better for them just to keep him and see what you can do other than trading him. Because if you're not trading him for Anthony Davis, you're not going after Giannis. What are you looking at getting other than just getting him off the books? Because the trade packages I've seen, do not make sense for what the Hawks are trying to do right now.
Yeah, that was going to be my point that I was going to say to that. I only trade him if it makes sense and I get the right package in return for him. And I don't know if Anthony Davis is a part of the right package for it. Because, like I said before, he's a walking injury. That's no disrespect to AD because when he's out there, he's a force. But there's a big question on when he's out there. So, if you could put together a dream scenario package where you lose Trae Young, but you get the comparable pieces back in return, what does that look like to you?
I need if we're going to lose Trae Young, we have to get a lead guard back in in return, and someone that can be plugged in instantly that doesn't disrupt the flow of the offense. Whether that be a guy like Keon Ellis, who I've heard been rumored to Atlanta, which I think he may be on the move for another team. But the only way I would look at trading Trae Young is if I could get someone like a Giannis in the building. I know it's far fetched. It may be far fetched as far as because I don't feel like Milwaukee would want him as a centerpiece in that trade. But a dream scenario would be someone that could be like a Giannis. It has to be a franchise altering move because this is a guy that you built your franchise around for years and years, as far as the past like 5 to 6 years. This has to be a franchise altering move. Whether he gets traded for role players that can help add on to what you have, because right now the weak points of the Hawks are their bench. You have a couple of guys on the Hawks bench right now that are ineffective. And also we're talking about a dream trade package. We have to get some type of size. We need size. That is the biggest thing right now with the Hawks. They don't have the size to be a competition right now in the Eastern Conference, even with certain teams not having a great year. They need size. They need legit 7-footers. We looked at Kristaps Porzingis like, yeah, he could be that guy, but with him having the medical issues that he's had, he has not been available for the majority of games this year. If you move off of him, you have to put Trae in a package that's centered around some of these expiring contracts that you have on the roster. But guys that I look at being gone before Trae, I look at Zachary Ricochet being traded before Trae, and I look at Kristaps Porzingis because his expiring contract is attractive to a lot of teams that are looking to, move off of. So those two guys I would look at being more tradable right now because people are still banking on the potential of Zachary Ricochet before they're looking at acquiring a Trae Young.
Yeah, I don't see it. When it comes to Zach, I'm sorry, I don't see it. Zach was the default number one pick because that was a year where it was very similar to 2013. Folks were just picking people based off of potential. You weren't sure who was going to be a surefire star in the league. The guy that came the closest was Victor Oladipo. Injuries unfortunately robbed him of that, but that's what that is. Yeah, I'm with you. Um, but who's to say that Milwaukee would say no? As long as you make it clear, you can have anybody on this team except for Jalen Johnson. If you want Jalen Johnson, I'm hanging the phone up. That's the one piece that you can't have. But you can have anybody else except for him. And if you can build a package around that to start building a future, because Milwaukee isn't going anywhere this year. Even with Giannis back out there. I know he's trying to, bring that fight to those guys. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen.
I don't know if Milwaukee would say no. I would hope that they would say yes because ideally, if we were able to get Giannis and possibly someone like maybe even I've seen scenarios where they've talked about Giannis and maybe even Kyle Kuzma as being included in a trade package. But I think in order to facilitate a Trae Young trade, it may need to be multiple teams involved in it. It may need to be a 3-team trade just because I could see, some expiring contracts matching up salaries. I think a lot of things have to happen in order to get this done just because of the Supermax contract that he had signed a couple of years back. I think that Jalen Johnson would be the only untouchable. Now, some other guys that aren't necessarily untouchable, but I would love to see the Hawks keep. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has benefited a lot this year, and I think that he is somebody that the Hawks need to retain no matter what. If anyone wants him, I'm hanging up the phone because I do think that Nickeil has shown a lot of promise this year. Nickeil could be a fringe all-star, not this year, but maybe in the next coming years, just based off of the fact that he's getting a green light that he never saw. He never saw this green light in Minnesota. He's getting I think that he's always been this talented. I think that he's just getting more of an opportunity to showcase it. I think that, if this is the end of Trae Young's tenure in Atlanta, it was a lot that was left to be desired, because when Trae Young had some of his highest trade value was when the Hawks were, back and forth on whether they would keep him or DeJounte. I think that was when he had some of his highest trade value, because a lot of people still to this day said that the Hawks made a mistake in keeping Trae Young and moving off of DeJounte Murray. But honestly, even when they traded for DeJounte, that was not the right trade at that time. That wasn't the right trade in any time, if you want me to be completely honest. You traded for another point guard that also needed the ball. And what you gave up altered how things are now because of the fact that you don't own certain picks. Now you're almost at the end of it, but you still don't own that first round pick, which is why the Spurs are hoping that the Hawks are going to continue tanking. That they're looking at that.
You don't own that pick, but let me give you some optimism. You do own the Pelicans pick.
Pelicans, yep. Pelicans pick is
and they are awful.
Yeah. And honestly, that is the piece that everyone is wondering what the Hawks are looking to do. Because if you were going to move off of someone like, I'm sorry, not Anthony Davis, but Giannis, pretty sure that Pelicans pick is going to come up in conversation. Because if we're going to lose our franchise star, possibly our franchise GOAT, unless you believe Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is, whatever you want to say, I still believe it's Kareem, but hey, if you believe that we're going to make a franchise-altering move and move off of Giannis, I think that draft pick holds more value than Trae Young right now. Because you're looking at... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. And I agree with you on that 100%, because now the question comes into play. If you're an Atlanta Hawks fan, this is a draft lottery. That pick from New Orleans easily could end up being 1, 2, or 3. So is it worth trying to acquire an Anthony Davis or Giannis as they go into the latter stages of their career, still on the back end of their prime, but very much closer towards the back end of it? If you could potentially, with that pick, get AJ DeBance, Cam Boozer, or one of these standout players in the upcoming draft.
So in a short answer, the question is not Anthony Davis, because I know that Anthony Davis is on the back half of his career and he's been shown to be injury prone. I'm looking at more so from a standpoint of Giannis Antetokounmpo. Do you see star potential as far as being a top 5 player in any of those guys that you just named that's coming out of that draft? Could you see it? Because I definitely see it in AJ. AJ, I can see it. Cam Boozer, I can see it, but I can also see him being a very serviceable role player as well.
AJ, that Pelicans pick, if they were to trade that and it ends up being the pick that AJ DeBance is drafted with, that would be one of the biggest regrets in Atlanta Hawks history.
Yeah. And I think that that's something that you have to hold on to no matter what. You have to hold that, because the only way I'm moving off of that pick is if that trade package has to be almost to the point where I could never say no. I couldn't say no even if I wanted to. But honestly, right now, you have so much leverage that you can kind of dictate, because we don't have to. I know some people are saying, well, you're not getting Giannis unless you include that pick. Well, then we're just not getting Giannis. Like, it's not, for me, you don't have the leverage that we have. You want us to give you that pick. We don't have to give you anything. We could just ride it out, let the Pelicans continue to be terrible, and just use the pick that we were going to get anyways. We don't have to do anything. So from a franchise standpoint, the Hawks have so much leverage. They just don't have to be in a rush to make a pick that would be good for the right now. Like, I think that they just have to practice some patience. See what's out there. You can dangle anything that you want right now, whether that be Trae Young, Porzingis, Ricochet, or that Pelicans pick. You can dangle whatever. I just want to hear, what are you willing to give us if we're going to give you any of those four things that I just mentioned? What would you be willing to give us? And it has to make sense for our direction, because we're looking at trying to win and win now. Are you willing to give us something that would win now if we're going to mortgage our future? Because we wouldn't have a first round pick if we gave up that first round pick. If we give up that pick, which is looking like it's more and more going to be in the top three, it could possibly be the number one pick again. What are you willing to give up from when we're making these deals? That is something that I think the Hawks have to really think about if they're going to move off that pick, because it's not going to come without some criticism if they do move off this pick. And then one of those guys that you just mentioned, whether that be AJ, whether that be Cam, whether it be Darren Peterson, if one of those guys comes in out the gate and looks like a perennial all-star year in and year out, you're going to have to, accept some criticism from not just the media, your fan base as well.
And at this point, I think the Hawks are done taking that criticism. I think there's a world where Trae actually ends up waiting out this season. They let the Pelicans continue to be terrible, and they just hold on to that pick. At least making sure you hold on to that pick is the smartest thing that you can do at this point. If you can move Trae Young without having to give up that pick, you have to at least listen to what some of those offers are going to be. But as long as the Pelicans continue to look the way that they've looked and you have that pick, you can't entertain offers for that pick, because I'm looking at a potential duo next season that could be Jalen Johnson and AJ DeBanza. That would light the city up right there in ways that the city honestly hasn't been lit up since Dominique Wilkins played here. Trae had his run with the Eastern Conference Finals in 2021, like you said, but we're talking about something that really gets the city jumping. That's exactly what that would do.
And the last point I do want to touch on when it came to Zachary Ricochet, it is not necessarily his fault. He fell into a draft that was honestly terrible. The draft was front loaded with a bunch of role players. If you look at it, in a lot of drafts, Zachary Ricochet would maybe even be picked second round at best, maybe even the very back half of the first round. But he fell into a draft class that was loaded, and I mean loaded with role players. Because I remember going into that draft, it was between Zachary Ricochet, Alex Sarr, Reed Shepard as some of the potential top draft picks for as far as the number one draft pick. And honestly, I know where I was with the whole thing. I wasn't sold on anyone. I honestly didn't see any one of those being a franchise-altering player. And let me just say this. That just goes to show you how unlucky Atlanta sports is, because we got the number one pick, the draft, after Wemby, but before Cooper flag. That just goes to show we got some of the most generational worst luck in history across all our major sports teams, because there's like, it's just so ironic that we got it in one of the worst draft classes. And it does remind you of the 2013 draft class when Anthony Bennett was selected number one. It just happens to show you that all these drafts are not built the same. Some are front loaded with potential stars, and some are front loaded with role players, and we just happen to get the latter.
And I'm going to emphasize your point even more about them being unlucky. You realize in that 2013 draft, the Hawks were going to look up to try to trade for Giannis, right?
And even in his interviews, he said that he thought he was coming to Atlanta. He did. He said that he thought he was coming to Atlanta, and he came and they picked him. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we picked John Jenkins that year. I am sick to my stomach, because the Hawks have not notoriously, if you look at it, they have not drafted well. They have not drafted well. You look at the Luka Doncic trade. You can look at the year that they got Zachary Ricochet. Jalen Johnson, out of the most recent drafts, Because Okongwu, while he's a great player for where his draft position was, where he was drafted, he should no. So
Something else
Jalen
that's
Johnson,
also been proven too, DeAndre Hunter is very much a role player. I know that
yes.
there were folks who were upset when the Hawks traded him. No, they made the right move. He is very much a role player. He can't even start in Cleveland.
Yes, and I know he got a lot of comparisons to Kawhi being a 3-and-D player. That is not him. He is a role player. Cam Reddish was a role player who is no longer in the NBA right now. So the Hawks have not drafted well. And I think that is not even an opinion at this point. We have the information to back that. That is a fact right now. The Hawks have not drafted well. Even when they drafted Jalen Johnson, he, as far as talent, was considered the best player in that draft, but he was raw because he did not play much at Duke, but he was raw. But we were banking on it. So I think that Jalen Johnson always had the talent. Of course, he worked on a few things, but I think he always had that talent. He just didn't get the opportunity at first to show it.
That is the only thing that people in Atlanta will say thank you to Landry Fields for. We will not say thank you for anything else. All right, so let's take it back to the NFL to close this episode out, man, because we talked about that Panthers and Bucs showdown happening on Saturday afternoon. Well, thankfully, we got something to really watch later on that evening. And that's going to be the battle of the Seattle Seahawks and San Francisco 49ers for not only the NFC West title, KB, the NFC's number one seed, basically. Now, this is the second straight year that Sam Darnold has been in this scenario. Remember last year on the Minnesota Vikings, they took on the Detroit Lions in week 18. The NFC North title and the NFC number one seed was on the line. He has a chance to do here what he could not do there last year, getting the W. But this San Francisco team is hot right now, and they are humming at the right time. Brock Purdy is healthy, and he's looking like a Brock Purdy that I honestly didn't know was really there. Last week against the Chicago Bears, he was spectacular. Some of the throws he was making, the way he was moving around inside and outside of the pocket. Robert Saleh is basically playing with a duct tape defense at this point, but they did enough to hold off the Chicago Bears. But I'm very impressed with what I've seen from Seattle throughout this season, too. Who do you think needs to win this one more?
You want my honest opinion? I think Seattle needs this. I think that, you know, the criticism of Sam Darnold, especially after last year with the Minnesota Vikings, is that he got it done in the regular season and he couldn't get it done when it mattered. I think that they need a home playoff game because I know that San Francisco has shown that they can go on the road, they can take their talents on the road and they can go win. You know, as long as they have Kyle Shanahan and like I said, I know that they yielded a lot of points to the Chicago Bears, but I do believe in Robert Saleh as being, you know, one of the top defensive coordinators in this league. So I do think that Seattle has a home field advantage like many teams don't. I think that they need this in order to, you know, because like I said, when we talk about matchups, having to go into Seattle and win a playoff game is a whole different monster. Now, I do think that they have the defense to win. And I think that that is what makes them contenders. I think that last year with, you know, Minnesota, Sam Darnold, he had certain things working in his favor, but I don't think about that Minnesota defense like I do about this Seattle defense. These guys, they can pretty much shut you out. That is how much belief I have. Bringing in Dexter Lawrence, I think that they have what I think of not comparable to the Legion of Boom, but they have a swarming defense. Mike McDonald brought in a philosophy from, you know, from his days in Baltimore that, you know, we have to win games with defense. And that is what I'm seeing this year. You know, we've seen them win games strictly with their defense. And with the career year that JSN has had, you know, Kenneth Walker being an effective runner on the ground, I think that they have enough that they can actually, you know, they can get it done. They could possibly be a dark horse. I don't even consider them dark horse because they've been one of the better teams in the league this entire year. And that defense has been playing lights out. They've been one of the better units total defensive units this entire season. So I'm going to give them, I think that they need it more right now than San Francisco. I think that San Francisco, while they have their injuries that, make it a little bit, more prominent that they need to win this game, I do think that I got more confidence for them to go on the road than I do for Seattle to go on the road and win.
So I'm going to say it's San Francisco that needs this win more. Seattle has been an excellent road team this year, so I have no doubt that they would be able to go on the road if needed and make a deep playoff run. It's just, do you trust Sam Darnold to be able to get it done? We're still waiting to see if he can get it done in those moments. San Francisco, that would be a madhouse for teams to have to come into. And don't forget about the fact that the Super Bowl is also in San Francisco this season as well. And I know that that's got to be playing in the back of their minds too. I don't know who's going to end up winning this game, but I think the Niners need it more.
And I understand why you said that. I'm looking at it more so because for the guys that have been there for San Francisco, they have that experience. So I'm looking at more of their experience and the lack of experience from the side of Seattle. And I'm looking at it like, do I trust Sam Darnold enough to go on the road and win a playoff game? And that is why I was under the belief that they needed that game a little bit more, just because for the guys that San Francisco has, their core pieces, they have been through a couple of runs together, and they know what it takes to win on the road in the playoffs. And I would have them, that championship experience, not necessarily being Super Bowl champions, but just being able to go on the road, win games, playing multiple Super Bowls, and although they didn't win one, just having that experience of knowing what it takes to go out there and go on the road, to go through the gauntlets that they've had to go through over the past couple of years, I was going to bank more on their experience than the lack of inexperience from the Seattle side, because, sometimes inexperience is a good thing because you don't know what it's like to have to go through those pressured moments. So, but I'm looking at, do I trust Sam Darnold? I'm not all the way convinced that I do. And that's more so what my reasoning is.
I trust him in the first playoff game, and I'm going to tell you why. You're either going to end up in sputtering Tampa Bay or haven't been there yet, Carolina. And I trust that they can go on the road and at least win that one. Now, when you start getting into that second rank where you talk about potentially Philly or Chicago, okay, got to have a different conversation at that point. But I trust them to at least get that first playoff win.
And I'm not even really 100% convinced about Chicago. I'm like, defensively, I'm not there yet with them, because I feel like they can have some things that you can take advantage of as well. As much as I believe in Ben Johnson, we talk about inexperience all the time. Caleb Williams has never seen it. The playoff atmosphere is completely different. At least I can say with Sam Darnold, he's at least been in the playoffs. He may have not performed the best, but he's been there, so he know what it takes. Like, he know what he has to raise his level of play to. Caleb Williams has not seen that yet, so I'm not even sure if now Philly. That's a whole different monster. We know that, like, as bad as they are, they know they win better. They win ugly better than any team in the NFL. So they would muck up the game enough to make it to where you're going to have to get comfortable winning you're going to have to win in a way that you may have not done in the entire season. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that whoever gets in from Tampa Bay or Carolina, I'm not convinced that they even make it out, even with a home playoff game. I don't even think that they can make it out of that, just because I'm be honest with you, X, I haven't been overly impressed with anyone from that division. So, maybe they get lucky, maybe they win the first game, maybe they don't. But if it's up to me, I'm not picking anyone from the NFC South to go further than the first round.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. To your point about Chicago, if the playoffs started today, they currently be the number 2 seed in the NFC, taking on the number 7 ranked Green Bay Packers. And I don't know if I trust them to win that matchup, even with all of the injuries that Green Bay has, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Matt LaFleur and his coaching experience in those games versus Ben Johnson and his coaching experience in those games. And the last time we saw Ben Johnson and his gadget offense in a playoff game, KB, they got ran off the field by the Washington Commanders at home.
Yeah. And like you said, they are very fortunate that if that is where it stands and that's where you know they end up having to play a team like Green Bay, you can't dismiss experience. And I think that they are very fortunate that they have some of the injuries they have, especially on that defensive side of the ball. There's no Micah Parsons out there. Very fortunate. I know that they just acquired Trayvon Diggs off of waivers, just claimed them off of waivers, but I think that with Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, and company, I think that they still are a threat. I'm not going to say that they're, contenders right now because of the injuries. It still worry me enough to kind of like, I'm not sure, but let's just wait and see. But I'm not sure that the inexperience won't play a part in that game. Because, like I said, it's a different atmosphere. Even with your home fans, it's still a different atmosphere because it's so much on the line. And we've shown, Green Bay can play in cold weather, just like Chicago. So it's not like they're going to be out of their element regardless. They're going to be in something similar to what they play in already. So that is something that Jordan Love has shown that he can do. Maybe not to the level that we always think, because we see that Jordan Love sometimes has inconsistencies. And he accounts for a lot of those losses that they've had because of his inconsistent play, but he's at least been there. He's been there before. Matt LaFleur has definitely been there before. So that inexperience from the Chicago side, I think is going to play a major part in whether they, how far they go along in the playoffs.
I want to bring up another NFC West opponent really quickly as we prepare to close out the show, and that is the Los Angeles Rams. And I want to talk a little about their collapse within the past couple of weeks because I have to make an announcement right now on this show. KB, I am pulling back on my Super Bowl picks that I said a couple of weeks ago. Remember, I said I'm going with the Buffalo Bills and the Los Angeles Rams. We are now taking them off the table. My picks will no longer be, maybe we'll talk about them next week, who I'm picking. Right now, I have nobody that I'm picking from the AFC. I have nobody I'm picking from the NFC. And I pretty much had a feeling after that Thursday night game against the Seahawks where the Rams coughed up a 16-point lead with more than 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I pretty much knew then I was going to be backing off of them. But and look, no disrespect to the Atlanta Falcons, because I saw a world where the Falcons could have won that game on Monday Night Football. But it's how the Rams looked in particular in that first half to where I'm like, okay, there's some holes over here now. There are some gaping holes. This defense has regressed from where they were in the first half of the season to where they are now. And here's the part that really hurts the Rams as they go into the future. You needed to beat Atlanta because you own Atlanta's first round pick. And now, if the Falcons win on Sunday, they will end the season 8-9. That is no longer a top 10 pick at that point. It's right on the cusp of top 15. And I don't know if you're going to get what you need now with that pick. And it goes back to what you said a couple of weeks ago, too. You don't mind the fact that the Falcons gave up that pick because of the season that James Pierce Jr. has had, the season Jalen Walker's had, but mainly James Pierce Jr. because the pick that was used to select him was the pick that was used in the trade with the Rams. Matthew Stafford's getting up there. And he hadn't looked like Matthew Stafford, the MVP, in the past couple of games either. So where do they honestly go from here if they're not able to go on some form of run? Now, it should be noted that in these past two games, Devontae Adams did not play, and he's got the most touchdowns, red zone touchdowns in the league, receptions-wise. They'll have him back for the playoffs, so that should make a difference. But this is pretty alarming the way that this has gone the past few weeks for them.
Yeah, and I'm gonna say like the biggest piece that I've seen, and you just touched on it, that defense. I looked at that defense as being one of the top units in the NFL, and they have not looked good. Whether that be the Seattle game, whether that be the Falcons game, I just didn't. I have not seen what I saw early in the season that helped me. Like they were such a perennial Super Bowl contender that I'm already like I can see a world where Matthew Stafford wins his MVP that he's that's been eluding him his whole career. I saw a world, and I don't even see that anymore. I think he lost the MVP at this point because of the last few weeks. Their play over the last 3 weeks, I think, may have cost him the MVP. And I'm not even confident that they can be in the Super Bowl now. Like, I'm kind of pulled back from them too because I'm not sure anymore. I don't know what team we're going to see, but I know that when I saw Bijan Robinson run over that defense, that made me kind of made me pause for a moment. I said, I'm not sure about them because they're going to see a lot of great backs in the playoffs. They're going to see a good couple of great backs in the playoffs. So I don't know.
As of now, they're the 6th seed in the NFC. That's how I believe the season ends for them. The number 3 seed is Philadelphia. I do not trust them to go into Philadelphia and win a big game. And we've seen flashes in the second half of this season of some of what Saquon was a year ago. I trust that Saquon would be able to go and do some things to this defense similar to what Bijan was just able to do in week 17.
Right, because you're looking at it like he doesn't necessarily have to just be effective on the ground. He could be effective in the passing game as well. That's what killed them with Bijan. Bijan racked up over 200 all-purpose yards because he was effective no matter where you put him out. You could split him wide. You could put him in the backfield. He was going to be effective no matter what. Now with LA, of course, Devontae Adams, there's no replacing of Devontae Adams. We know that. There's, being that guy in the red zone. I do think that he changes the landscape of their offense completely because there's nothing you can do with Devontae Adams. We know that. We've seen it over his career, especially in that red zone. His footwork is immaculate to the point where he can get open even in the tightest of spaces. I think that they got to get back to their identity on defense if they want anybody to take them serious, because if you have to go into Philly, the only way you get out of that game with a win is if you are able to stop Saquon. Because right now we've seen that even in the games where Jalen Hurts has not thrown for, Philly has not looked great to their credit in a lot of games this season. But that's another story for another day because it doesn't matter if Philly has to look great. If LA does not put out the defensive performance to shut down them on the ground, they will not win. I don't care the situation. I don't care what they do on offense. If Philly decides that they want to do a ground and pound game, they will win if they can't shut it down. Like you said, I don't have any picks right now because what I was so sure of, a month or two ago, I'm not sure anymore. I don't know what's going to happen. And like I said, all of this is dependent on the matchups. But the Rams fell from the 1st seed to the 6th seed. That just goes to show playing with your food is not a good thing. And you collapsing in that second half, especially that fourth quarter against Seattle, all of this is looming large, man. Like, Seattle is now playing for the 1st seed. And you're looking at it where you might be one and done in the playoffs. That just goes to show that you did this to yourself, because the way that they were rolling at the middle point of this season, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see an epic collapse in these last few weeks when things were supposed to be getting solidified. I didn't see this. So now, bigger than the Matt Stafford MVP race, you're looking at like that you might have had one of your best years statistically from an offensive and defensive standpoint, all for nothing. That's where you're at right now. So I'm not confident right now saying that the LA Rams can go into anywhere right now and win a playoff game, let alone the defending champs.
I'm with you on that 100%. Like I said, I'm pulling back on my picks on those too. Buffalo, I mean, that's obvious after what we saw on Sunday. But yep, that's pretty much where I stand with it right now. I believe when we come here next week, I believe I'll have my picks picked out then. Hopefully I will, because there are no great teams this year. That's where the problem comes in. That there are some really good teams, but there are no great teams that really stand out.
Yeah, we're waiting to see. We're waiting to see if they're going to show their greatness. But like you said, it might just be a case of the really good, because even in the AFC, is it Denver, which I have a lot of questions about them on the offensive side of the ball. Is it Houston, who could possibly get in the playoffs? Jacksonville, who knows what team you're going to see out there? I don't know. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered over the next week, week and a half. We got to see because, like I said, with the playoffs approaching and some of these teams in do or die games, we're gonna get a lot of questions answered that are gonna show us who is ready to take that next step. But what we will see is it's not gonna be Kansas City this year. So now you don't have to go through that boogeyman in Arrowhead. So now who's gonna step up from the AFC side? Josh Allen, you've been close your whole career. Now do you have what it takes to finally, now that you don't have to get over that hump in Arrowhead, can you do it? Because now you have no excuse. You don't. You're the reigning MVP. You don't have to go through Arrowhead no more. You don't have to go through Pat Mahomes anymore.
Honestly, the same applies for Lamar Jackson too if they make it in.
Absolutely. You don't have that crutch to say, "Oh, well, we ran into the Chiefs." You don't have to worry about that no more. Your competition now is young Bo Nix, Trevor Lawrence, possibly CJ Stroud.
No, there is no possibly. Houston is in the playoffs.
Okay, so they're a wild card team. Yeah, because have they completely locked up the AFC South?
I don't think they have just yet.
I think it was a couple of scenarios that they could possibly still, clinch the AFC South. I think so. I think they're like a game, but no, I think they're a game behind or half a game.
Yep, they are half a game behind. So if Jacksonville loses on Sunday and Houston wins, I believe they could still get the division.
Okay, so you nothing is solidified. Like you still have Baltimore, so Baltimore, possible Baltimore/Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Jacksonville, Houston, Denver. This is the field that represents the AFC. And so, like I said, this is more wide open. We talk about paths to the Super Bowl all the time. This is the best opportunity I feel like a lot of teams have to get there, especially a team like Buffalo and Baltimore who have gotten so close but haven't been able to get past Patrick Mahomes. You have your opportunity. It's right in front of you. What are you going to do?
And on that note, we're going to close out this episode of the Why Not Us, Why Not Now podcast. We appreciate everybody for always tuning in, listening, viewing us, however it is you join us. We'll be back with another one next week. And one thing we do know when we come to you next week, we'll know what that NFL playoff picture will officially look like. But for KB, I'm X, and we're saying peace.
Peace.